In my last video, I talked a lot about Everhood, an RPG game that's kind of a rhythm game, but not quite. The combat is heavily synced with music, but moving in time with the music doesn't necessarily help you dodge attacks. It's like a pseudo-rhythm game. But because of the way the combat works, the soundtrack ends up being really important. And the soundtrack to this game is really good. But of course, when you make a pixel art RPG with an isometric overworld, unique combat style, and characters that go when they talk, then of course you're going to get compared to Undertale. And standing toe to toe with Undertale in any way, shape or form is pretty difficult. And when you listen to Undertale's soundtrack, it does something really well that Everhood's soundtrack doesn't really do at all. And that is leitmotif. A leitmotif is essentially a small melodic line in a piece of music that is associated with a certain character, location, or even emotion. Movies use this all the time, and all of the best film scores do it constantly. Like in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, when the soundtrack goes, that means the Prowler is showing up right about now. And games do this too, and Undertale does it constantly, and it does an incredible job of it. Now don't get me wrong, I like Everhood's soundtrack, it's pretty good. But each song feels disconnected from each other song in the soundtrack. You just go to this boss, fight him, he has a cool song, but the next boss's song is entirely detached from the song you just heard, the story overall, and any of the other characters in the game. There's a lot of examples of leitmotif being used in Undertale, but there's not really any in Everhood. Undertale has the intro song's little melody appearing in countless other places in the game. There's the battle themes melody appearing in different variations of other battle themes. There's Asriel's theme. But my favourite example is how Metaton's numerous themes all interweave with one another. Does a game's soundtrack need to do this to be a good soundtrack? No, not at all. There's a lot more that goes into an incredible soundtrack, a lot of which both Undertale and Everhood do a really good job at. But leitmotif makes the soundtrack feel more like a part of the story rather than just a background asset. And without those leitmotifs throughout the music, the soundtrack feels disconnected from everything else happening on your screen. The leitmotif in the soundtrack does a great job at showing how much thought and care has gone into this game's soundtrack. Comparing Undertale's soundtrack to Everhood's is quite hard though, because in Everhood, it is heavily insinuated that the music you're hearing is diegetic music. Diegetic music is essentially music that is actually playing in the game world. The characters can hear the music just like you can. Non-diegetic music is music that is there just for the audience. Back to the Spider-Verse example, this is diegetic music, because Miles is singing along, he's listening to it in his headphones. This is not diegetic music. Miles can't hear the epic music blaring in the background of the realization of his true power. That is just for us. Everhood never explicitly says that the music is diegetic, but it's heavily insinuated that it is. Enemies will move and dance along with the music. Their attack is the music. It's especially obvious in fights like this one, where the fight takes place in a nightclub, and the enemy is dancing along to the song, the room in the background is shaking with the music, stuff like that. So maybe having leitmotifs in Everhood wouldn't make much sense, because two unconnected characters sharing a melodic line in their attack pattern might not make any sense. But for whatever reason it may be, Everhood's lack of leitmotifs throughout can make music seem very sporadic and disconnected from the story. I know it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, but it's interesting nonetheless. So maybe in future, when you're playing through a game you've never played before, just listen out for where the music might repeat itself once or twice. Thanks for watching.